we have about 15 to 20 minutes that we are going to continue lines of questioning, but do so in a roundtable fashion with the three of the speakers that we've had this morning. And just to start off, is there a question maybe that you might have? Yes, sir, for one of the panel members.
Yes, and I think Dr. Miller may be able to address it, but others might also. One of the things we're seeing is a lot of alternative health practitioners are advocating bone broth for a dysbiosis of unhealthy gut. And, it's part of it is a microbial problem. Part of it, I think, is immune response. So they're trying to rebuild gut with bone broth. And you've seen an explosion in demand for bones. I'm just curious, from your standpoint, if you see any of that, if you're advocating those types of things.
Well, healthy bones are going to give you a delicious broth. So, my feeling is, it's terrific if, just on a culinary level. Is there any research to support the idea that bone broths help give you a more diverse population of gut bacteria? Is that what you're asking? Because the answer is no. But there is, certainly this idea that and it's I think it's out there a little bit more in sort of the folk healing, but that bone broth is good for your health and boosts your immune system. There isn't a lot of biomedical research on it, but I certainly think that it's a wonderful thing to eat. So.
Do you know anything about GAPS diet? Are you familiar with it?
I am.
Do you have any thoughts on it, or are you an advocate or kind of a downplayer?
I think that there are many ways to eat healthy, and I think that what is sort of the fundamental underlying principle in all those ways is really trying to eat food, whole food that has traveled as few miles as possible, and that has been grown in beautiful soil and has been cared for. The idea that that there's this codified system, the GAPS diet, for dealing with autoimmune disease, there's not a lot of actual biomedical research to support that. And I know that's very controversial to say. But it is at the same time, there's components of it that really do seem to make a lot of sense. For example, it turns out that a lot of people with autoimmune disease tend to have a lot of food sensitivities, and one of those food sensitivities oftentimes is something related to gluten. So this idea of taking a lot of the gluten out of the diet maybe has some benefit. But I think the bottom line of not eating foods that have lots of additives and that are highly processed, or not eating foods that have any synthetic additives is probably the most important thing.
I have a question that I'd like to ask each of our panel members, but you talked about Cody's aha moment when he's separating his calf, and was there like a pivotal aha moment when things just really started to come together, tying soil health and human health, or Mark with food density, or Nicolette with the way that we raise animals? Do you have any like snap, kind of apple hit the head type moment?
Can I first answer the other question for a moment? I just want to tack on a little bit about this whole gut flora thing. Unfortunately, I wasn't in the room, so I didn't see all of Daphne's presentation. But in the research I did for Defending Beef, I began looking at as well, not just from a perspective of what we're eating, but everything we're exposed to. And I know that's a lot of what you write about and speak about. And there's a lot of good research with respect to children on farms having lower levels of food allergies and asthma. And it's increasingly becoming, there was actually a study just last week that was released about specifically asthma and a protein that is found on the lungs. Maybe you've talked about it, I don't know, Or is that a study you don't want it to be?
No, it was most of my talk.
Oh, okay. Sorry. It
It's
really
okay.
should have been in the room. I only wasn't in the room because I was pushing my 2-year-old.
That's good.
But so there's a lot of research on this whole question of the environment that children are raised in. And also just this broader question of our overall health and how it relates to our gut flora. And I'm surprised how often when I talk to people, they're unaware of this rising body of research that connects it from everything from heart disease, diabetes, obesity. And the reason I wanted to say something about this is because I was thinking about my talk last night and where I was talking about the importance of all of you being advocates for what you're doing. And this is actually a really important element of the value of what you're doing. Not just creating food that is healthful for people to eat, but also creating a physical environment for humans to live on. And it's a disappearing environment. You know, we have fewer and fewer true family farms and ranches in this country. And in my view, that's a real problem for many reasons. But one of the reasons is that there's this tremendous health benefit to living on a farm. So I just wanted to add that after. As far as the aha moment, I don't think I really have a really good one, but I have to say when I was doing the research for Defending Beef, I was very surprised to learn about this question of the biology of the soil and how it's been, because I was a biology major in college, so I thought I kind of, had some idea about this, but I realized when I was, the deeper and deeper I got into that issue, that I knew more about chemistry and physical properties of soil than I knew about biology of soil. And the fact that that has been so neglected in mainstream agricultural thinking for decades, to me that was a moment when I kind of connected all these issues and it all just kind of made sense.
Sure. Okay, so the aha moment, I talked to you a little bit about this morning about an Alan was talking to me about the relationship between bricks and not only sugar but other dissolved solids. But there was another moment that I had was when I did the steak book. I raised my own cow, and I could spend an awfully long time just watching her eat. We tend to regard animals as being stupid. We hire PhD nutritionists because animals don't know what they need. And something that fascinated me was that I would watch this cow make her way across pasture, and you'd see her nose floating over the pasture, and then she'd take a bite here, and then she'd move for a bit and take a bite there. And I thought, what is motivating this? Her decisions are deliberate. It's not random. Then she'd walk over to a tree and strip the leaves off a tree. I remember when I was talking to some farmers, they talked about how different breeds, Highlands, for example. A farmer had some Highlands, and I think he had some Holsteins. He said the Highlands were completely different grazers. They would just get up spontaneously in the middle of the day one day and go over and eat a bunch of bulrushes, and then they would never touch the bulrushes again. So I think it's really interesting when, the thing that really separates our brains from animal brains is all these more recent evolutionary changes where we have these rational parts of our brain. That's a pretty interesting part of your brain, but the part beneath it still operates the way animal brains do. And it's so interesting to think about the way animals feed themselves and how far we've gotten away from that. We think they're idiots and we think we're the smart ones. But they'd all be dead if they were idiots, because they don't read books about nutrition. The other thing I'll say about the bone broth is your bone broth is only to be as good as your bones. I think one of the reasons things like these are becoming popular is it's getting people back in touch with what real food is supposed to be. What's more interesting to me, maybe there's a connection between bone broth and gut flora. Maybe it heals you. What's more interesting to me to think about is the fact that most of the broth that people consume these days is more like a synthetic broth. They make it from essentially umami triggers. These can be hydrolyzed yeast or Carulla yeast or just straight up MSG, and they add synthetic little cubes of bouillon. And they do taste. It tastes okay. Like, it really does taste okay. But when you make a broth from the real thing, there's just a way deeper nutritional density to it. It tastes a lot better. I was telling Alan Williams last night about, I made a Rick Bayless Mexican chicken soup, but with a real, a classic roaster. This was an 18-year-old barred raw, no, 18-week-old barred raw. Bit of a difference, but I like St. Patrick. And the flavor profile in this broth was just, arresting. It was unbelievable. And to me, nutrition is about food that nourishes you in a deeper way. I think I mean, it's interesting, and I'm still open to the idea of food healing, and I think there's a lot there. But I think it's also just a question of giving yourself the right fuel, that you're less prone to breakdown.
Okay, sir, we have time for one more question.
Behind you, Jason.
Okay, is it a good one? No. Okay, well, I'm going to hand you the microphone.
Have there been any studies comparing soil-based, let's say vegetable growth versus hydroponically raised vegetables as regards to nutrition and taste?
I've been getting asked that question more and more, and I have to admit, I really need to sit down for a week and do some comprehensive research on this, because I feel like there has to be more out there than what I've found so far. But what I've found so far is just astounding to me in the thinness of the information, and that there is just not enough research on hydroponics at all. It's something that is just taking off like wildfire, and that is exceedingly popular, and I understand why it's popular. But we actually don't quite know, in terms of nutrient value, how it compares in many realms. I did find one study that, looked specifically at spinach and found that it was fairly equivalent. And actually, unfortunately, as someone who's a big fan of soil, it was a little bit higher for the hydroponics. But there, in a lot of areas, there isn't still a lot of data, and it is something that we need to understand better, because there's entire programs now that are just being dedicated to hydroponics.
I can.
Yeah.
When it comes to flavor, hydroponics generally perform worse. It's difficult for me because my father-in-law has one of those hydroponic tree gardens that he's very proud of. I can't bring myself to tell him that his tomatoes would taste better if he planted them in the ground. What's really interesting about this research is that no one really knows why this is. But the thinking is that there are stresses on plants in a natural environment that actually, a lot of the chemicals that we perceive as flavors in plants, in some cases, for example, in the case of fruits, they're literally putting that there to attract the herbivore. They say, I want you to come eat this. What's really interesting to consider is that when we eat vegetables, and I like to tell this to vegetarians, they don't exist in the vegetable when it's whole. They burst into being by these very quick enzymatic processes as soon as the cell wall is broken. They're defense compounds. They're there to get microbes and other animals to go away. We like onions because we like the flavor of the onion defending itself. So we literally like the chemical sound of an onion screaming. So we are at our most Ted Bundy-like when we're eating vegetables. We want to kill our animals as humanely as possible, but we want to rip that vegetable apart because that's when you get the flavor. But there is an association with stress. So sometimes if you raise something in a hydroponic environment, the nutrients might look the same, but what you will get, what will be different is what they call plant secondary compounds, which are in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands. And these plants produce them for reasons we probably will never fully understand. They have an effect on us, on our well-being. They are bioactive, and that's where you see the real difference.
Well, we do understand. We co-evolved from them and with them. That it makes perfect sense. We all came from unicellular organisms, and nature is very, very thrifty. She really just only makes the same compounds over and over and over again. And so, in fact, when you think about it, clover produces a compound which looks frightfully similar to the estrogen that women make from their ovaries. And celery, believe it or not, has a compound that looks unbelievably similar to testosterone, which is, I guess, why women love celery. I don't know. But there's a lot of these compounds really just recur over and over again, and so that a lot of the things that come from plants or that are made in plants are ones that actually we need in our own system as well.
I just want to add one quick thing, because I really don't consider nutrition to be my primary expertise, but I think Michael Collins really articulated the idea really well, that you can't look at any food and just list its, nutrient values and consider that the nutritional value of the food. Because we're really just in such an early infancy in our understanding of human body and nourishment and how all of this works. And so I would personally be skeptical even if a whole slew of studies comes out from the hydroponics industry showing that there's a higher nutrient profile. Because to me, that if you're raising plants in an environment that they're not meant to be raised in, and I just saw a little video on YouTube a few months ago where this British journalist was going around the United States and visiting all kinds of supposedly future food solutions, and one place was a cricket farm, and that's going to be the meat we're all going to be eating in the future, and one place was a big hydroponics operation. And it was all, multi-story in this huge building, no sunlight, it was a totally artificial environment. And I thought to myself, we have no idea over the long term what that would mean for the human body to be relying on that as our primary source of nutrition, this totally artificially created food. So I think it's important to always keep that question in mind, rather than simply looking at the nutrient profiles.
Let's put our hands together and thank our speakers for taking the podium.